Hello, everyone, and welcome to my full location breakdown for DarkHawk Zabu. So, I do have a general DarkHawk guide out, but I don't have a location guide for it. And I do think understanding location is a very important part of uh, mastering a deck, figuring out how to play it, when to snap, da 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 da. So I wanted to add this supplemental video if you are going to be playing DarkHawk Zabu to really understand locations, why they're good, and whatnot. So we're definitely going to talk about the metagame going forward, but I will say this is the guide as of the video being posted. So obviously, if you're watching this a little bit later in time, months down the road, this guide is, in my opinion, going to be obsolete because things will change, location will be added, and how people react to locations will also be different. So I would say if you're watching this, soon, week in, a day in, this is going to be pretty accurate. But the longer uh, after you see this from its posting, the more obsolete it will be. It will be. But let's begin. So first things off, we will be talking about the deck itself. This is my current deck list for DarkHawk Zabu. So you do have to know the deck I'm using before the locations will make sense, right? Because if you have a different DarkHawk Zabu variant, the locations might not be as accurate for you as it is for me. So just have to put it out there. This is the current list that I'm mostly running. I change a couple cards sometimes based on like feature locations, hot locations, that kind of thing. But this is like the main core of the deck. So just want to let you know what we're working with before we get started. All right, so I put all the locations in tier maker, and then I started sorting them based on how good they are, to field and to play, and how much I can take advantage of the location compared to my opponent. So I will be probably posting a link for this in the description box below, so you can probably download it if you need like a full list for yourself. But here it is. We're going to start with the very good locations. So these are locations I really think are very powerful for DarkHawk for reasons I will explain. But usually, if I see one or two locations like this, I'm pretty much snapping. So they're definitely very powerful locations. So first off, we have. Okay, first of all, I'm gonna butcher location names. Just want to toss that in there. But honestly, this thing isn't super duper clear in terms of like what it looks like. So maybe I have to zoom in a little bit. But Lecugulia. I mean, that's a great start for this video. But the one where every time you play a card on that location, you add 3 rocks in the opponent's deck. Playing DarkHawk Zabu, so rocks or more cards in your opponent's deck is gonna make it stronger. Same thing with Veruvian Mines. Doesn't really matter what's in the deck as long as there's cards in the deck. So it kind of locks down those locations that are pretty unplayable because it basically says if you play a card in this location, my Darkhawk gets 6 power, which is kind of uncontestable. So those two locations are just like pretty stupid for Darkhawk. Um, a lot of times people like play into like Ruben mines early before they know what my deck is, and then they're like, "Oh, I've kind of lost." And you see that you have a Darkhawk in your hand, you can kind of snap. So really really strong. Subterranean is also the same vibe, where you have to be a little bit careful with this because if you don't have Darkhawk before it reveals, then the chance you hit Darkhawk at all is pretty low. So you do have to be careful that you don't like see this turd one, you snap, and you don't have Darkhawk in your hand. But if you do have Darkhawk in your hand, then this location is so busted for you, right? Like you get plus 10 power on base, right? You on your Darkhawk, it's so hard to contest. So this location just like as long as you have Darkhawk in your hand, kind of wins it for you. Same thing with Onslaught Citadel. I I I actually can't read the name, so let me get the locations manually so I can actually just read the names because it's a little weird that I can't even read them. All right, so this is helping me. All right, so yeah, Onslaught Citadel, um, definitely a really strong location because it works with your Zabu and it works with your DarkHawk. So your cards become one cost if you put Zabu in there. I know a lot of people also run Zabu, so it's not as like it's still win, but just being that flexibility of being able to flood the board is just so strong. And then also your Zabus just get like so much stronger if you play it on there. So it's kind of easy to like win a location just playing the DarkHawk on that one location by itself. So uh, really strong location for us, and definitely something you should keep in mind. So those are like the like very strong, very good locations for us. Not really worried if two of them pop in. It's kind of like an insta win. So that's like that level of strength for those locations. Next, we have the good locations. So these locations are, I would say, favorite for us. We can abuse them in some way. They don't insta win, and other people can take advantage of those locations as well. But they are very reasonable locations that can make you win at like a losing game. So we have Avengers Compound. That one uh, forces you to play on turn 5. And you would say like why is that pretty bad or pretty good for us? It's because we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man's kind of a broken card. Just wins you some matches alone. And being able to Spider-Man this card on 4, turn 4, your opponent can't play a single card on turn 5, right? So that's like so broken to give you that flexibility of like getting an extra like 10 plus power on a location that your opponent can't do anything to contest. So it's just really good because we have Spider-Man, and doing that is pretty strong. Next up, we have Bar with No Name. This location doesn't really make sense that it's good for us, but the fact is that we run Scarlet Witch, and a lot of people don't expect that. Obviously, as I'm making more videos, more people are going to start expecting that for this deck. But currently, as I was climbing, right, no one really respected my Scarlet Witch play. So you pretty much always do a turn 6 if you're going to do it at all. And you can really catch people off guard. They think they're going to win that location or whatever. You don't want to be playing into that location, by the way, before turn 6. So that's probably a good tip where you don't want to be playing into the location. Actually, you want to pretend like you can't affect it, but then turn 6 is when you start playing your cards in there and then ending on the Scarlet Witch. So that can really surprise people, really get you a few extra cubes. So the location ends up being good for us. As people get better and maybe they start playing around it, it won't be as good. But I would say like right now, since you have a way to contest that location is actually a very easy or efficient way to gain a lot of extra cubes. Kalimatar, this location doubles your on reveals. You're running quite a bit of on reveals with the Cog, the Rock Slide, the White Queen or Jubilee, the Black Widow. So there's a lot of ways to just get more value, more rocks, things like that in your opponent's deck. So you get a lot of extra value by this location flipping over. So it's pretty good for that. Nowhere is a pretty good location. Prevents on reveals. And you might think, oh, that why is that good for us? But it just protects your vulnerable units, right? So Darkhawk can get Shang-Chi, Darkhawk can get Enchantress, Zabu can get Enchantress, Zabu can get Rogue, all these cards have these weaknesses to them. But when you play them in nowhere, there's no real counterplay a lot of the time. There are some couple cards that can get through it, but it means if you play your Darkhawk on nowhere, they can't Shang-Chi you, they can't Enchantress you. So it's a pretty safe location to play your big units and not worry about them being countered in the final turn. Another thing is like sometimes you can like Spider-Man other locations, and then they can't do something like Silver Surfer into nowhere. So definitely want some location, some games just by restricting them last turn to only play into nowhere. And since they're playing like a Silver Surfer deck, they can't do anything. So there are other benefits besides just protecting your units. Morag is kind of because of Spider-Man. This card is broken. I'm probably gonna be saying that a couple of times. Like, there's a couple locations that are just good because of Spider-Man. This is another one where if you can double Spider-Man on turn 5, and then the other locations Morag, well, they can't play a card, so they basically lose most of the time. There are some scenarios where that's not the case, but it just restricts the opponent into doing a lot of things. So that one's pretty good. Monster Metropolis is also pretty good just because our Darkhawks tend to be the biggest unit on the board. So it's very easy for us to swing this location by playing the Monster Metropolis, right? They think they have the +3 power. You play the Darkhawk, who now you are the one getting that +3 power. So it could be a 6-point swing, which is huge. So definitely a pretty decent location for us to get the win there. The big house is pretty good if you have Zabu. If you can play the Zabu early, then I would say the big house is a pretty strong location because people can't play 4, 5s, and 6. So if you play Zabu, they can't play Enchantress unless they have Zabu themselves, right? But a lot of times they won't, they won't have that exact scenario. So you get to protect your Zabu as well as you can play your Darkhawk, you can play your Mystique in the big house, and since you can't actually play really big units a lot of times very easily into this location, that one Darkhawk, that one Mystique can really carry that location by itself. So it's a really, really strong location for us if we have the Zabu. If not, it's not as good. But if that's the scenario, you're probably on the back foot anyways. TVA is also pretty good just because of Zabu, because you get to play 2 4-drops on 4 before the game ends, right? And especially with Darkhawk can win a location super, like, the earlier the game is, the stronger Darkhawk is because people haven't drawn their cards yet. So turn 4 playing Darkhawk is just so you win that location most of the time. Obviously there's some scenarios where I've lost it with Darkhawk, but a lot of times you will win turn 4 Darkhawk. So you really get that combo where you play Zabu on 3 and you have a Darkhawk on 4. It's so hard to lose TVA. So definitely a really good location for us. I could even argue putting it in very good, but the thing is, other people can play Zabu. And if they play Zabu, you don't play Zabu, and you snapped in TVA, you've lost, right? So, you got to be really careful, but it is a good location. Next up, we have the okay locations. Atlantis. This one's not like that great for us, but because we tend to flood the board, sometimes people will play like their big card, but then we'll just play like 4, 3 cards into that location, and they're like, I guess I have to reinvest, right? And a lot of times they don't want to reinvest into Atlantis because you're like, well, if I play a card here, then that means my card's losing 5 power, so I have to have a 6-card base, and that's a lot of commitment into this location. So it's like it's a lot of effort to contest Atlantis if they have already put 1 card in. So sometimes they just start ignoring it, and they're like, I don't want to contest this. So it actually is an okay location for us, not too bad. Atalan, this location isn't like particularly good for us, but it's also not like particularly bad for us. So if you don't have Zabu, you can shuffle your cards away, see um if you hit it, and also if you have Zabu, you like your hand, you can Scarlet Witch it away, right? So it's not too bad. This is gonna be a long video, right? Because we're already like only 10 in. Next, yeah, I probably need to be going faster, right? Because I'm already thinking about like how long is this video gonna be. We're already 14 minutes in. If I'm doing a minute per location, I think going through the okay locations are fine, right? Because those are the ones that are gonna matter a lot. The average locations, maybe I'll speed them up. Um, Ego's fine for us because if we can get the Zabu on 3, then Ego starts playing reasonably. So if you see the ego, I always snap turn one ego. So like maybe I just like have no fear and people leave, but I always snap turn one ego. But if you have the Zabu and they play the Zabu, then they just start playing reasonably. The one downside is like sometimes they'll mess up on Mystique, right? So, but overall, like I think it's still okay for us. Uh, Hola, let me read the name. Hala. This one is okay because if the opponent like fights us in that location, like they'll put a strong card in, and you have the DarkHawk, you can snap play your DarkHawk, and a lot of times you can beat them. I have lost this location, and it's like insta leave, right? If you lose this location, you insta leave. But DarkHawk gets stronger early, and turn four is a pretty big power turn to win a location. So same thing with Asgard. Though Asgard is down on average. Death's Domain isn't too bad because we have armor. So turn six, you can armor play your board. You can also Scarlet Witch it away as well. So you have a lot of avenues to counteract the Death's Domain. Uh, Kiln. This one where you can't play it turn four is also not too bad because you can put a lot of power turn four if you play Zabu, right? You get to play 2/4 drops. If they don't have that, it's hard to contest. Um, Los Diablos base. This one's okay, just because not having a location isn't bad for Darkhawk players. Like you don't need locations, so just having nothing that screws you over is honestly a good location to have. So I don't mind that. Runes is not in here, but like runes would also be okay for us. The peak can be hit or miss. So we have a lot of pretty low power, high cost units, and being able to hit the peak on a lot of them can be a pretty strong tempo play, especially if you start moon girling them and having multiple copies of like Mystique or something. It could be really, really, really valuable. So the peak is definitely okay. Obviously, you always have to be scared of the peak because your opponent could have better hits, and that's always the case, right? So it's not like this isn't very good or good because your opponent could just have a better roll than you did. So especially with like Iron Man and stuff like that, you can't beat that. Like it's you, and it's for zero mana. You have no idea if they have it. So there's definitely you definitely have to be fearful of that. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a great location for us. Luke's Bar is all right. Just because you have a couple cards that you don't mind playing into Luke's Bar over and over, and Black Widow into Luke's Bar is pretty toxic. I'm gonna say that. Where you Black Widow every single turn, they can't draw a card. They basically get three cards for the whole game. It's like so bad for them. The one caveat is like there's like a window where you give them a card to play Zabu, but like they get one extra card. Like it's horrible for them, I would say. So yeah, they definitely Luke's Bar could be good. This one could be good, but sometimes people can play around your cards and whatnot, and you're having to invest two mana every turn to do nothing, right? Like it's not amazing, but it could be decent. And there are Silver Surfers running around, so if they have like Silver Surfer Brood, or like they don't need any more cards, they've already won. So you gotta be careful. So it's not a great or amazing location, but it can be. Rickety Bridge is okay because a lot of times you can just tie this location, and tying is good because it goes down to most power, and since Darkhawks tend to have more power on average than other archetypes, having a tied location is pretty favored for you, I would say, most of the time. Another thing you can do is just Spider-Man the Rickety Bridge, and then the units die, and then you just play one card into Rickety Bridge, and you usually win. So there are some pretty safe plays with it. So I would say okay. This location is pretty okay for us. Another Spider-Man one is Strange Location. So you just Spider-Man turn five or or so, right? And then they can't play a card in there, and they have no cards on that location most of the time. So definitely an easy Spider-Man abusable location there. The vault is once again Spider-Man abuse. Jesus. Where you use Spider-Man on four, they can't play on five, and then six it's locked down. So yeah, I mean this card, I think this card needs a nerf and is broken, if you can't tell. But yeah, Spider-Man's really good into the vault as well. Same thing as it's that's not the only thing. You can also play DarkHawk on 5, and they can't Shang-Chi it back on 6. So definitely protects a location that can protect your Darkhawk. At Throne Room, usually if you play Darkhawk into that and you're using the deck correctly, you'll be the biggest unit. So you do have to be a little bit careful of Dino. Dino can like overpower you here and things like that. But a lot of times, most of the time, I would say you're favored in Throne Room because you have the highest power. So that would be the rationale for that. And then Wakanda, they can't Shang-Chi you. So if they're running Shang-Chi, it just takes out that option from them, and especially if you're running armor. I mean, as well, they basically turns off one of their cards. You know, a lot of times that they're using to try to win. So definitely a good location for us as well. And then next we have the average locations. I did forget to. No, I didn't. Okay, so yeah, you can see everything. Next, we have the average locations. So these locations are not necessarily good or bad for us. So Altar of Death, uh, early it's bad. They can play cards into it. I'm gonna try to start speeding things up. Asgard's bad because drawing cards is just really bad for my our for us. And even if we draw cards, we a lot of times we don't do the draw cards, so it doesn't really benefit us really. Bar Sinister, it's hard to find like a good play for it. I will say one caveat is you can play Rock Slide into Bar Sinister, and a lot of times like that will actually win you the game because you just fill their deck with rocks, and I guess Bar Sinister you can actually move to okay, if you have a Rock Slide, but a lot of times people will like Green Goblin you or something, or if you're waiting turn 6, they'll hit you with a Professor X or some nonsense. So it's a little monk up, but it can be okay for you. Baxter Building, this one's somewhat difficult where they can also win it. Like if you're fully contesting into one location like that, right? You get Shang-Chi and whatnot. It's not that great. Cloning Vats, I think other decks could utilize Cloning Vats way better than our deck, so I wouldn't say it's that favorite, but it's average, right? So it's not like horrible for you. District X can be good. If you have the Zabu, right, you're gonna be a little bit ahead on it, but it does like neutralize your early game um, plays with the cog or things like that, so it can be bad. Elysian, I think other people can utilize it very good as well, but it can be okay if you don't draw Zabu. It could be like a Zabu replacement. Hellfight Club doesn't really do anything, I would say, for us. Like we don't care about it, so it doesn't really bother us, but a lot of decks don't care about it. uh Kintar, I would say the one caveat for that location is that if you play Darkhawk there, it actually will just be a 0 power card once it combines. So you don't fall for that. You can lose a game because you played Darkhawk into that before it transforms. Machine World, this could be like okay. So a lot of times I'll play Black Widow and then they'll play the Widow's Bite into Machine World, and then I'm just like, okay, well, I'll play my Widow's Bite you gave me into Machine World, and they'll do like, I'll play the Widow's Bite you gave me back into Machine World. It's just like, well, I guess we're not drawing, which is actually fine for us. So that is actually like could be okay, but it's an annoying location. I would say. Kuntun, is that the? Let me look at the um Kunlun. This location doesn't really affect us too much. You do have to be careful of like move decks and things like that, right? So I've definitely lost because I didn't pay attention to the location and they moved their card and they're like, oh wait, they got 8 power, and I was like, wait, I guess I didn't pay attention to that. So you have to be careful. Miniaturized Lab is okay. Not a horrible location, but not like an amazing one either, where you're going to always win. So you do have to be careful not to get trolled by that, but it can be decent. Mirror Dimension or Mirror's Dimension. This one obviously depends on the other locations, so it's hard to give a rating to it itself. Murder World, a lot of people don't really bother or play into it, so it doesn't really matter. Negative Zone can be okay because you can play like one Darkhawk there, and that's your only card there, and then you can really contest like a whole board of cards. So, um, you can put a small investment, relatively small investment, and still win that location. And so that one's decent. Uh, Ops Corps Tower once again. Um, no one really plays into that location, so it can be okay. I would say like this location's maybe bad. Like I could see the argument for this being bad instead of average because a lot of times you'll play back Widow, then this will flip up and then they'll play their Widows into it. So I actually think I would probably move this to bad now that I'm talking about it. But most of the time like you're not gonna notice it. The one real bad thing is if they electro you, and then you insta lose. So I would say like this is probably bad, than average. Like I would say that's actually there's way more downsides for this being on the game than upsides or even no reaction to this being in the game. So I would say this is probably a bad location for us. Sakar, this one is fine. I was thinking this might be bad, but overall, I haven't had this be like a horrible location in our games. So sometimes just playing a free card is nice, and a lot of times you can take good advantage of it compared to the opponent. Honestly, I could see this being bad too because if it drops Darkhawk, it sounds good and people leave actually, but it's actually not that good for you. But people do leave when they Darkhawk gets dropped, but it actually limits your play. So I actually think this is bad, but people play like it's not bad for you. But hitting some of your other cards is perfectly fine, right? Darkhawk and not I mean Zabu and things like that. So it can be okay. Sewer system. This one, is not too relevant for us sometimes. So not a bad location, but not a great one. I would say kind of indifferent too much a lot of times. Can screw Cerebro players though, so that's always a nice plus. Um, what's it called? Let me look it up. Starlight, right? It's Starlight. Starlight Citadel. This one is all right for us. I'm not even going slower, right? But sometimes you get to manipulate the locations. If you're playing well, it's good. Nexus is okay, right? You have the Darkhawks; they can give you a lot of power. They can test all the other locations, and if you have like armor there, then it's pretty safe. Biofrost can be bad, but sometimes being able to move and hit that third location can be helpful, especially if it's the location you don't have access to. So not too bad about it. Westview, right? It just switches to a different location, so it's hard to say it's bad or good. Um, Wakanda's Emissary can be good because you're playing Moon Girl, so you can double up on the extra 2 power and have a lot more of an advantage with that location than maybe your opponent does. All right, now we're up to the bad location, so you can kind of see there's a lot of bad ones. Right, but I mean there was a decent amount of okay ones, but there are also a lot of bad ones. um Gonna try to speed this one up too. Collapsed mines, flooding your locations is generally bad. Collapsed mines, when it was featured, it was fine because I put death in, but afterwards, like if it pops up turn 3, it's really bad for you, right? Because you want to get rid of the mines, but you want to play Zabu, so that was not great. Giving your opponents cards, in essence, is just bad. You don't want extra cards in the game, so the hub, daily burgle, all that stuff is just not good for you. Danger room, right? If it hits, I've just been unlucky with this location, but if it hits you, you lose. Dark Dimension's pretty bad because you can't play Zabu into it. You can't play any of your on reveals into it, right? So you kind of and also Mystique is hard to play into it. It's honestly the Dark Dimension could be a very bad location than a bad location. But sometimes your opponent like gets scared, so there's that human factor where sometimes it can be good for you. But yeah, this location, I would maybe move it down to very bad. Now that I talked about it, because I did this yesterday night when I was like pretty tired, and now I'm recording the video in the morning. And I can, my opinions have changed for some of these locations in that sleep time. Dream Dimension's pretty bad because you can't play double two drop on five because they cost three. So this one's also a pretty bad one. I could argue it's very bad, but I know other decks like have it worse with this location. So I would say it's not as bad because they're also struggling a lot of the time. Currently, range is hard to it's hard to win this location. So you pretty much most of the time get a rock if your opponent's paying attention to this location. So you don't want extra cards on your board. I would say you really need all that for board space. So any extra trash on your board is just really bad for you. So this is not a good location for us. Hell's Kitchen, giving your opponent draw of any kind is horrible, right? It messes up your DarkHawks, it gives them more options, etc., etc. Their draws become consistent. Like it's not a good location. It's not the worst, right? Because it's only one draw, but like you do feel it. Flooding's pretty bad, not because the location's bad, but because they're the ones who created it, right? Most of the time, so it means that they're playing a deck that can abuse flooding, and you're not. So it just ends up being like a bad location for us. Jotunheim's just not great. I don't think anyone really likes this location, but it's not great for us. And if they play like Green Goblin and stuff like that, it just gets even worse. Lemuria can be really bad because if it pops turn three and you want to play Zabu, well, you can't. You play a Zabu and it doesn't give you the active, so now you have to you only get to play one card next turn and before you start doing a thing. So it's pretty limiting. Mojo World, opponents can abuse Mojo World way more than you can. Monster Island is easy Shang-Chi target and easy, Darkhawk target. You have to contest it, and sometimes the powers messes with you. Mirror Island, people can utilize this location better than we do. We tend to play a lot of cards later in the game, where other players that have decks that play earlier in the game abuse it a little bit more. Necrotia, that -2 power, you feel it, and you can't like ignore this location where the -3 power you can kind of ignore it because your opponent's also ignoring it, but your opponents don't really ignore this one too much, and you do feel the -2 power. Sanctum Sanctorium, we can't really affect this location at all. If they play a Mr. Fantastic, we lose to this a lot of the time. That's kind of troll, so I just not a good location for us. Shadowland, once again, we don't want extra cards. Central location, I just think the opponent can utilize this better than we can a lot of times. We can use it a little bit, but we already fill our location spots, so we run out of locations most of the time if this thing pops up, so that's not good for us. So I would say pretty bad location for us. This one could be very bad, but sometimes there are some like examples, like if you don't have Zabu, this location is actually decent, right? Because then you get to play you get to fill a lot of locations without the drawback of not having a Zabu. Stark Tower, once again, I think our opponents can use it better than we can. Grand Central, same problem. We actually don't like summoning cards for free, because it messes with the Darkhawk Mystique combo, right? We need to play Darkhawk, then we need to play Mystique. If any of them drop, then they're wasted, right? If the Darkhawk drops, then you can't play your Mystique. So it's pretty bad for us. So I don't like that. Sokovia, definitely also pretty bad. Our all of our cards are pretty important, right? You lose Mystique, you lose Darkhawk, you lose Zabu, like you're pretty behind. So definitely not a good one. Ice blocks for the same reason. If it hits any of your core cards, you can lose the game off of that. So Iceman, can also lose us the game. So I'm not saying play Iceman, but yeah, that card can win games by itself. Superflow, I think just my opponents can utilize it more than we can. We don't really need Superflow if we have a Zabu. So if it pops up, they can use it. They can just definitely get a big lead compared to you because of it. Same thing. We don't want to give our opponents energy. It just gives them more things to do, better ways to react. So all these energy adding locations are just pretty bad for us. World ship, like 4 slots is pretty bad. It can be salvageable, but like it's just an uncomfortable location, especially if it's not like first or something, and you've already like committed other tools into other locations. It can be pretty bad. X Mansion, you add this RNG factor that's just not fun, and can be pretty problematic to deal with. So definitely not a fan of it. Xander's okay, like, but I think other decks use it way better. We don't tend to play a lot of like impactful cards, but like you make their rocks relevant and things like that. Same thing like Washington DC, right? The rock that you're giving them become 3 power, and that's not negligible, so it's pretty bad. Volmir tends to be bad because we play Black Widow, right? We can play Black Widow into Volmir, but a lot of times you play Black Widow on 2, Volmir triggers on 3. They play the Widow's Bite on the Volmir, and they really didn't get a downside. So this one tends to be kind of bad for us. Warriors Fall is just awkward. It really limits the cards we can play early because all of our early game have very low power, right? Like you're playing 2 power, 1 power, 2 power, so you really can't play anything into the Warriors Fall until like very late in the game, and they don't have that restriction. They can like play a random card there, and I'm like, well, that location's dead for us until the last turn. And the last turn, right? They know you're gonna like it turns your plays too obvious, right? Because you know you're gonna contest the last turn, so they know that too, right? And your plays become very telegraphed. So it's just not a good location for us, uh, based on how it ends up changing how we want to play. And then we have the very bad locations. These ones we definitely want to go in depth into. So just try to hit them all. Isles of Silence, it turns off your Zabu, it turns off your Darkhawk, turns off your Mistake. It's just horrible for us. Fish Tower, this one isn't like bad, but like a lot of people have movement abilities where they can mess with your stuff. Magneto can ruin you, Arrow can ruin you, Juggernaut can ruin you, and so this is like a location space you don't pay attention to. Then it hits you, and you're like, oh right, they have this sucker, and I lost completely. So you definitely have to be aware that this one is in. I like play armor into this so often because I'm like, yeah, you're not tricking me here. I'm not falling for that one. So yeah, do you have to be careful. Limbo uh is just pretty bad because you a lot of times um you want the game to end quickly. The quicker the game ends, the better it is for you. Limbo, they get an extra card, they get more tools. Your Spider-Man becomes pretty obsolete. Things like that. It's not great for you. Mindscape has the same problem where giving you lose all your tools to make big plays turn 6, right? So a lot of times, um, this deck wants to surprise them turn 6 with like, oh, here's like 30 power turn out of nowhere. Not out of nowhere if they're paying attention, but like here's a 30 power turn. Oh, did you know exactly what I was gonna play? No, you didn't. So it can be pretty powerful, but when they mindscape you, or when you get mindscaped, you don't have those tools anymore, and it gets pretty bad. New York just adds too much chaos to the game, where it's hard to know exactly where they're going to go. It also turns your Spider-Mans off, right? Spider-Man doesn't really do too much into New York because they can still move things around. Uh, Nivadel, didn't I? Wasn't that the first location? It wasn't, right? Oh, they look, they sound the same. But the extra 5 power, it's hard to win this location. I've noticed like a lot of decks have better tools to really abuse this one, and things like Iron Man just auto win it for you for them, and there's so many ways where I'm just like, this location is really bad for me. So definitely not a fan of this one. Where it turns out a lot of decks can utilize this location way better than we can. Uh, and it also turns everything into a Shang-Chi target, man. Every card you play in there is a Shang-Chi target. It's just so bad. Space Stone, a lot of decks can just mess with you or like make this location actively bad for you before you get to do things. So I definitely like either changing it away or just committing somewhat early or so. But like overall, it turns your plays awkward. You want more. You want to have a lot of locations to play with, a lot of space to play with, and when you lose 3 spaces, looks so bad. So not happy with this. I wouldn't mind like a two location variant of this one where you can only play 2 cards, right? Because one is too limiting, right? But 2 cards, okay, that could actually be pretty fun to work with. Nova Roma, I assume. Let me look it up. But it essentially you draw a card, I believe. Where is the card? I whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. Nova Roma. Yeah, Nova Roma, right? Your opponent drawing a card is just pretty bad for you, where it messes with everything. It gives them more tools. It messes with your DarkHawk, and it just gives them the consistency that you already had and didn't need. The raft is just I can't. It's hard to win this location, because or it's hard to complete this location first. Because you tend to play one card into one card into one card, right? So like turn four most of the time is when you have a chance of completing it. A lot of times your opponent can like just like brood, bam, they've completed it, and it's just like, yeah, okay, and then like they can still contest the brood late, and okay, well, they got something for free that I don't know what it is, and that could have changed the whole matchup. So it's hard to really feel comfortable or in a good spot if they win the raft. So just not great. Pegasus Project also same. Giving your opponent a ton of energy, we don't even use it that well. Where your opponent could just like hit you with Galactus turn one, and you're just like, well, okay, you know what I mean? It's just not great to have that level of RNG into your matchups. Not a good one. And then Shuri's Lab, um, our decks can't use this that well. Our Darkhawks have one power. Our cards have a lot of low power base. So our Darkhawk has one power base. Mystique has one power base, right? Like they can really, it really makes contesting this location very hard. So you kind of auto lose this one if their opponents commit to it. So not a great location for us. And then we have Titan. Like they can play leader on five. End of story. Am I done now? But like they can they manipulate it's basically free energy, right? So and it also lets them play earlier than normal. So that kind of thing is just a big no into us. We can't abuse it while they can. Any location like that is just really bad. So definitely not a fan of Titan. The Triskelion. This one can be pretty bad because if you can't play any of the cards, it locks your draw. So I've had a lot of scenarios where this pops up, can't play anything, right? Because I have a lot of fours, and then they didn't give me anything to play. So I'm just like, well, I can't play anything till turn four, and I just lose. And it's also messes with your draw, right? So you lose a draw basically, which you would think is good, but if you don't have Zabu or anything like that, it can just be really bad. And then you also open up all these like random scenarios that you can't play around because like they got random cards and you have no idea if they got like a direct counter to your deck. So definitely not a card, a location I'm happy to play into. I will still play into it if my hand is still good, but it opens up some weird scenarios where I can't predict how they're going to play. Weird World definitely not good for us, right? They don't you don't get anything. This can be bad for the opponent as well. So it's not insta leave, but um it just messes with your game plan, right? Because you're not gonna have a great hand that works perfectly as soon as Weird World flips, right? Like even if you have DarkHawk Zabu, like you don't have any of the ways to increase the damage or the power of Zabu, so you just lose out on so much. So it's definitely not a good location for us. And then we have a couple horrible locations. So these ones are just almost unplayable. I would say like I'm basically unfavored from the get go since any of them pop up. So we will talk about them. The one that might not be as insta leave would be Gamma Lab. But the thing is, you want to be playing Zabu on three. So if you're playing Zabu on three, right, and your opponent's playing into the Gamma Lab, they just get the extra Hulk for free, and we can't contest that lane. We can't deal with the Hulks, right? We don't have a Shang-Chi, we don't have anything. So they basically get a lane for free most of the time. Another problem is that if you're playing Black Widow on two, Gamma Lab pops up on three, right? They get this free zero power, zero cost card into the Gamma Lab, and you're just like, well, I've already lost, right? Thanks, Widow. So that's like the downside of Widow there. Um, but it's still just a really bad location for us. So definitely don't like Gamma Lab. Crimson Cosmos, basically most of the time it's either you don't have Zabu and then you can play into it, but then you don't have Zabu, or you do have Zabu and then you can't play any card into this location at all, except for the Captain American Chavez, which a lot of times they can easily beat. So it basically says I lose this location for free. Definitely not good. The Metis one you could pretty much leave immediately. I'm gonna skip it up. There are some scenarios, there are some roles where you can fight it, but that's maybe more high level. But regardless, you're always behind. You're always behind in this location, and they can hit the nuts. So um, definitely not a good location for us. Right, our Darkhawks are 1 power, Mystiques are 0. It's horrible. Olympian is the same problem. You're the opponent's drawing 2 cards. It's way too many for against Darkhawk, where they just have too many options, and our Darkhawks basically don't do anything anymore. Right, they're barely giving you any strength, so it's just pretty bad. And the Savage Lands is just so awkward for us where it limits what we can do into Savage Lands. Do we want to play into it, right? A lot of our early game is very low power, so a lot of times I'll like play a Zabu here, and then it's like how do I contest this location with 4 power base, and I only get to play 1 card. And if I played early before turn 6, well, then they know exactly how much power they need. So it's so hard to really contest this location, and once again, losing space is just very very bad. So this is just a pretty bad location for us. So overall, those are the locations that are revealed. Obviously, as things get as more locations are added, this you're gonna have to update this a little bit, but I will try to add um the image file for you to take a look at. Another thing is that I can't do this for every deck archetype, right? Because you need a very high understanding of the deck and a lot of games through it to really know what locations are good or that good, that bad, right? To have such an accurate tier list. So if you want to have something for like your own particular deck, right? I would just say tag the viewers, tag your favorite streamers or whatever that are playing your deck and say, oh, could you make a guide similar to this one for this particular deck, right? Because I'm not gonna like if you tell me like make one for Silver Surfer. I wouldn't say I know Silver Surfer to the extent to make this detailed of a guide in locations for it. So uh, I don't have infinite knowledge about every single thing, right? I've been playing this one deck most of the season, so obviously as I play more and stuff like that, I'll get more knowledge on different archetypes. But like Cerebro 3, what are the like? I don't know, I don't know. So just tag other people and like let them replicate this. I'm perfectly fine with that. Um, and I did make the tier maker, so that should be pretty easy to copy, right? Like getting all the image files for this was kind of annoying, but I did it, so now it's usable. So hopefully that works out. But yeah, definitely a long one, but that's how I do the guides, right? They're gonna be long. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of the day.